Two, one, and we're live. Welcome to Beyond the Pitch. I am your host, Ian Joy, alongside my co-host and ever-present Phil Brown. There he is, the main man. And of course, our expert, our Beyond the Pitch expert and Sky Sport analyst, Danny Higginbotham. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. A lot to discuss. Phil, how are you doing? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, mate. Happy New Year to yourself, Dan. Hope you're all doing well. Don't forget to follow the Danny Hager at Higginbotham5 on Twitter. Before we get into anything, Ian, I want to give a special mention to the Offside Trust.
Yep.
Offside Trust is a fantastic organisation that started by Steve Walters and Andy Woodward. Of course, a trust that is out there changing the way coaching is done, changing the way things is done to make sure there's more legislation put in place to keep our children safer. So, folks, please lend them your support. If you're on Twitter, follow them and keep in touch with them because they're out there trying to make sure that your children are safer. So, great job, guys.
Yeah, fantastic. It's a magnificent cause and it's gathering pace. And like I say, I think it just needs people to keep reminding about it, to keep it out there in the public eye. And like you say, it's a fantastic cause.
Excellent.
Well, it is great to have your support as well, Danny, along with many other professionals of the game. And we expect to see a lot more players coming out in their support for the Offside Trust and for the gentlemen who are behind it. Now, let's get into the most important discussion of the day, the Premier League. We've seen some excellent action today. 2 games in the last 48 hours, which is incredible amount of business for these players and for the coaches as well. We've seen a lot of frustration today, in particular a match you were at, Danny, and that was Manchester City's match against Burnley. Talk us through the performance first and foremost.
Well, it was frustrating, I think, for Manchester City fans. I think, people can look at it and say, well, Manchester City went down to 10 men, so they were always going to find it difficult. This was before Fernandinho got sent off, and in my mind as well, rightly sent off, a 2-footed lunge. And it's just not clicking for Manchester City at the moment. Burnley went there with a game plan, and I think they showed that a lot of teams don't fear Manchester City in terms of even going to the Etihad. They set up with a strong team. They went with a 4-4-2, didn't want to defend constantly. They caused a lot of problems when they went forward. What they did very well in the first half, they allowed Clichy at left back to come forward and Sanya at right back to come forward. And then the minute they won the ball back, they looked to get it over the 2 full-backs' heads and try and isolate the centre-backs with the pace of Gray and the physicality of Barnes. And something that we've actually mentioned before when we talked about Manchester City, they only play with one defensive midfielder, and for me that's going to cause them problems. They got to half time with their goal intact, with it 0-0, and then Guardiola made 2 substitutions, but on Silva and Borna Aguero, that made a real difference to them. They got 2-0 ahead, but once again weren't able to keep a clean sheet. And I think a team more clinical than Burnley would have gotten something out of the game. But it was really interesting to see the supporters. After about 10 minutes, Guardiola's trying to G them up, trying to get them going, because there was a lot of frustration coming from the supporters. And afterwards, with the phoning that we did, a lot of supporters weren't happy with Guardiola, which I think is very extreme so early on. But I think the way they're looking at it is that if you look at the top 6 teams in the Premier League at the moment, so we look at Arsenal, we look at Chelsea, Manchester City, Manchester United, Liverpool and Tottenham, 5 of them 6 teams are progressively getting better.
Yep.
Manchester City, from where they were at the start of the season, have actually gone backwards. So I think that's the worry for Manchester City supporters.
That's a great point. Today on NBC's broadcast of the Premier League, Phil, I'm not sure if you caught it after the game. I think it was Robbie Mustoe who actually pointed out, him pretty much same as what Danny just mentioned there, that Manchester City are not any better off than what they were before Pep Guardiola arrived. Do you agree with that?
We lose you there, Danny?
No, I'm still there. Oh, sorry. Was that to me? Sorry.
No, it was for you, Phil.
Oh, for me? Sorry.
Yeah, we lost you. No, Phil, the question. No, basically what I was saying is that Robbie Mustoe had said on the NBC broadcast that he thought that Manchester City were not any better off than what they were before Pep Guardiola arrived.
I don't know what the points total are between this season and last season. I think Guardiola's first.
They are 3. They were 3 better off at the start of today's game, and they made sure that the whole of the ground knew that by putting it on the advertising hoardings. which
That's brilliant.
just tells you your own story. But they're 3
Yeah.
points better off this season than what they were last season.
That's unbelievable.
Better off from a guy
Yes.
who essentially knew he was being sacked, and so did his team. I think already at this stage Pellegrini knew he was out because it had already been confirmed with Guardiola relatively close. Look, Guardiola is here. One of the biggest remits that he has at City is to make them better in Europe, to build pedigree in Europe. Obviously, the Premier League is important. But if Guardiola leaves City and they haven't improved in Europe and they add a league title, it would be seen as a failure. Mancini's done that. Pellegrini's done that. I think you have to be fair to Guardiola. We live in an era where we expect everything right away. You have to give the guy time to do the job that he's here to do, and not everything happens right away. It used to be that a guy coming in would get at least a season or two before you would judge him. We don't live in that world anymore. I think to see massive noticeable differences in Man City over a 12-month period, City weren't that bad last season. I can see why you would see massive noticeable differences over United because they were awful last season. So I think for me, the difference between what you saw at Pellegrini and what people want from Guardiola will be if he can make that difference, City will be champions or thereabouts. I think when you're talking about maybe he can change City 5% more than what Pellegrini did. So I think it's unfair.
One of the biggest problems we've seen. Go ahead, Danny.
I think there's two things. I think the end of last season, Manchester City squeezed into the top four on the last day of the season. So they didn't have a great season for their standard last year.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing for me is that, and this, Ian, you as a former footballer, Phil, you doing what you do, it doesn't matter what industry you are in. When you get to a certain age, you find it difficult to change.
Yeah.
This is a big problem that Manchester City are having. Forget today's games, but the last round of games before today, Chelsea had one player over the age of 30. Liverpool had 2.
Yeah.
Arsenal had 3. Spurs had none. Manchester United had 2. Manchester City had 6. Now, that for me is a big issue. I don't know how you feel, Ian, but the older I got in football, the less I was adaptable to change. The less I wanted to change because I was not stuck in my ways, but I knew the way that I wanted to play. Now, Guardiola's come into this club. Barcelona was very different. He went into a football club that everybody knew the Barcelona way. He went to Bayern Munich. He had some young players that could adapt. You look at Manchester City, and he's trying to change a lot of the players' positions, a lot of players' perceptions of the way that he wants them to play, but they're too old in the tooth for that. That's the big problem that he has. So therefore, they're not going to be as open to change as whether it was at Spurs, whether it was at Chelsea, or whether it was even at Arsenal.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's much more difficult to coach players who are above the age of 25, getting closer to the 30s. They've got that experience. They don't want to listen as much. It's much more difficult to coach, to get them to listen, to get them to do what you want them to do. So having 6 players over the age of 13, your starting 11 is always difficult because you know that they've got in their own mindset how they want to play, break their own records, make their own bonuses, win their own games, and they've got their own goals set for them before they even go into kickoff. One of the biggest problems I'm seeing with Manchester City this season, Danny, has been discipline. And again, today we've seen another challenge coming in from Fernandinho that was a brutal challenge. I mean, back in the day, it probably would have been acceptable. But now in today's game, with the speed that it's at, with the referees and the rule book that they've got being much more tighter, you just can't get away with making challenges like that. And Fernandinho picking up his 3rd red card in 6
since November.
I mean, that's embarrassing, really.
It is, but it also goes back to something we touched on earlier. When you look at Chelsea, they play with 2 out-and-out defensive midfielders. You've got Matic, you've got Kante. You look at Arsenal, they play with Coquelin, Xhaka, or El Nani. 2 of them 3 play. You look at Tottenham, they have Wanyama and Dembele or Dyer. More defensive-minded, so as in terms of 2 defensive midfielders. Manchester City play with 1 defensive midfielder. That's Fernandinho. Torre plays alongside him, but Torre is not a defensive-minded player. So what happens is Fernandinho finds himself in a position where he's actually having to do 2 players' roles. Because the way that football is going now, it's becoming all about counter-attacking, especially if you're a lesser team playing against the big teams. So you're a top 6 team, you know you're going to have the majority of possession. So what they do, and we've spoken about it before, when they're on the attack, they will play with a box. So you have your 2 centre-backs and your 2 defensive midfielders. Manchester City are still 2 centre-backs and 1 defensive midfielder forming a triangle. So therefore, Fernandinho is having to put in more challenges, cover more ground, probably make a lot more late challenges than other players. And therefore, that gets the better of him. But like you say, he has to understand that the minute you go in 2-footed, if the referee makes the right decision, then you get.
Was it a red card? Was it a red card?
Yes,
it was a red card for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a red card because what you're doing, you're taking both feet off the ground. You're not in control of your body then. Yeah. And then what he did, he started off as a scissor, but then he went and directly pointed in 2. The minute you do that, you leave the referee with no option whatsoever. And this, funnily enough, was about 3 minutes after there'd been a little bit of nervousness and frustration from the supporters.
Donny, isn't that a little bit of frustration, though, when you actually get to a stage now in this game where you're not sure how to make a challenge anymore? Back in the day, I mean, 10 years ago, back in the day, a challenge like that would have been okay in the Premier League. Nowadays, you just can't get away with it.
But Guardiola's just said he doesn't coach tackling, so which is obviously no one's coaching tackling in training sessions. But is it about reading the game, Donny? Now is he expecting you to win the ball back, not necessarily jumping in with 2 feet? Whenever you see Fernandinho getting sent off like this, is this hurting his defense?
What it comes down to is that if you look at most 2-footed tackles that we do see that are sendings off, we look at Rocco, he should have had 2 where he was sent off. Fernandinho, obviously today, yes, he was sent off. You look at Vardy at Stoke, it was a little bit debatable. In my mind, more often than not, when you see a 2-footed tackle, it's a lunge, it's a desperation challenge, which means A, you're either out of position, or B, if you some of the times you actually see that you're in possession of the ball, but you've taken that heavier touch. You've taken too heavy a touch, so therefore you're causing the situation yourselves. But there's no excuse, because at the start of every season, the referee will come into your football club and say, right, this is what is acceptable, this is what's not acceptable. So therefore, there's no excuses, regardless of whether the football has now become more strict, which it has. You still know the rules. It's not as though it's a rule that's just come out at the start of the season. This has been around for a long time, the 2-footed tackle not being acceptable.
Phil, we seen and heard from Danny, obviously, before we went on live, that Pep Guardiola was talking and trying to G up the supporters around him. But post-game, the interviews that came from Pep Guardiola were one-worded answers. He was frustrated, clearly, at the referee's performance, frustrated by the media. I mean, do you think that maybe coaches should accept that they have a responsibility to be professional at all times? I thought the interviews after the game were really embarrassing for Manchester City, for Pep Guardiola, and the way he's handled this situation a little too aggressively, in my opinion.
I think when you get people on the heat of the moment, you're going to get responses that maybe are unprofessional. You know, this is very unique ground for Guardiola. I always felt this was going to be the hardest job of Barcelona, Bayern Munich, City. He had a totally different job. And I think that Guardiola is sensing that he's losing that air of invincibility that surrounds him. Make no mistake about it. In similar with Barcelona and Real Madrid, Barcelona are somewhat defined by what Real Madrid do and vice versa. You can bet your life that Guardiola is feeling the pressure of Mourinho doing exceptionally well, and that being a benchmark for how he's being judged. What he needs to be really careful about is the English media turning against him. They haven't done that yet, but if they go after him, this is going to get really, really, really uncomfortable. And so, especially when you're trying to introduce a whole different style of play to the English Premier League that they really that is alien. You know, so I think Guardiola has to be really, really careful and making sure that the English media don't go after him.
I think what the English media do, they can make you and they can break you. So what you do, you make sure that they're your friend. Yeah. It's as simple as that, because they can look after you. But what I would say, what didn't help himself, he brought up Stecklenburg at Everton in a previous game that he played against Manchester City. Now, if you get to see the Burnley goal, he's complained. He said that Bravo was fouled for the goal. Now, there's 2 instances. One, he comes out to try and punch across. He just flaps it completely, misses it. There's no doubt in my mind there is no foul there.
Yeah, I agree with you.
There is a foul. Yeah, there is a foul afterwards, but this is what incensed the Manchester City players. When Ben Mee hit the ball, it hit the crossbar and it came down, went over the line. The ball then went back out and Gray bundled into Bravo. Now, the Manchester City players got incensed with that, but the whole idea was the goal had already been given.
Right.
So it didn't matter. It doesn't matter what had happened to the goalkeeper. The ball had gone over the line previously. So therefore, there's no argument there. And I just think that Guardiola in them times, he, as much as everybody has none more so than myself, have said how good a coach he is. He also has to be humble at times and accept that, you know what, it's not that way in the Premier League. You haven't just got to play 3-4 games a season.
I think he made a big mistake with Bravo in that I understand you want a sweeper keeper. I understand that's key to how he plays. But in the English Premier League, you need a physical goalkeeper. You need a big goalkeeper. I think people looked at him in that Manchester derby and said, when you looked at the Ibrahimovic goal in that Manchester derby, people said, he's going to get targeted. He's small. Small goalkeepers, Victor Valdez, I think, suffers from something similar. When you have small goalkeepers in the Premier League, I remember when De Gea first came in as a big lad, he got targeted. I think they target Bravo as a weakness.
I think one of the issues that you have is that when he was with Bayern Munich and also with Barcelona, teams would have a deep press against them. So if the ball went back to the keeper, whoever it was, whether it be Neuer, the Valdez, for example, at Barcelona, they had all the time in the world on the ball. But what teams in the Premier League are now doing to Manchester City, they're having that initial high press. So they're saying, right, we're going to press you that high that you have no choice but to go long. If you try and play short, we're going to make you make a mistake. If they beat that high press, what happens is the 3 or 4 that have pressed high, they say, right, forget about the ball. We will get back and we will all maintain our defensive side of things in our own half. So you turn into a 4-5-1. But what teams like Burnley did today, what other teams have done that have been quite successful against Manchester City, have said, listen, we're going to press high against you because we know if we make you kick long, no disrespect, but Iheanacho, Aguero, they're not physical threats. They're not going to beat centre-backs in the air, so therefore the ball's coming straight back at you.
I think it's a great test of his management ability. When you are going into the Premier League, you've got one style that you've managed to accomplish very well at Barcelona. You tried to do it in the Bundesliga, it worked very well. Not necessarily in his Champions League for Bayern Munich, but he had a lot of success of that with both of those clubs, and they won a lot of trophies. However, when you come to the Premier League, being a different animal, a lot more physical, a lot more speed, I would say, in the Premier League compared to the Bundesliga and what he's experienced in La Liga. So I agree with you on that. But this is a great test for Pep Guardiola because he's coming up against a media that's different like no other league. He's coming up against players and managers who are different like no other league because they're smart. They know exactly what you're trying to do. We've seen it already with Barcelona. We've seen it with Bayern Munich. We know that you like to play the passing game. You got rid of your goalkeeper for a reason because he wasn't good with his feet. So we know exactly your style. So immediately, exactly what you're saying right there. Put the pressure on the goalkeeper. Put the pressure, that high-tempo pressure from that first third and make it very difficult for Manchester City to play their game because that's what he wants to do. Now it's a real test. I'm actually quite excited because it's going to tell me whether or not Pep Guardiola is one of the best we've ever seen or not. Taking away nothing from what he's accomplished as a manager before because it's been terrific. But this is the ultimate test, in my opinion.
Well, I think what we saw, I think it is without question.
Yeah,
I think it is without question. It's the toughest league to come into and try to adapt and try and stamp your authority. I think what we saw in the Champions League game at Manchester City, when Manchester City played Barcelona, and Barcelona went at Manchester City the way that Manchester City like to go at teams. Obviously, getting beat 1-0 at halftime. Then at halftime, what we saw was Guardiola do to Barcelona what teams do to Manchester City. They went long. They beat the press. They ended up beating Barcelona. They ended up beating Barcelona because of that exact reason. But for whatever reason in the Premier League, I just think at times I look at Guardiola and I have all the respect in the world for him, but I think he needs to show the Premier League a little bit more respect because it's an unforgiving league.
That's a great point.
If he feels at City, question of both of you, does it change how people view Pep Guardiola?
He, don't get me wrong. I think Ian hit the nail on the head when he said that nobody will take away what he's done previously. But football is all about the here and now.
Right.
It's as simple as that. Nobody cares about what you've won previously. What have you won in the Premier League? You know, and he's following managers that have all won the Premier League at Manchester City. So therefore, he is supposed to be a cut above everybody, one of the top coaches, managers in the world. So therefore, he should be able to bring the Premier League trophy back to the Etihad because Pellegrini won it and because Mancini won it.
Yeah, ultimate test. And I think it's great to see a manager like him not settle at Bayern Munich or Barcelona. He's always trying to improve, get better himself. So you have to give him a lot of credit for saying, now's the time to go to the Premier League. We've seen Leicester City win the championship last year. Now you've got a new champion probably on the way this year. Who will it be? Chelsea are running away with it at the moment, but the ultimate test is there for Pep Guardiola. He's got a couple of years to really prove himself at Manchester City, or as we've seen previously, if you don't win the Premier League and you don't get far and succeed in the Champions League, he'll be the next one out the door, regardless of what he's won and regardless of the name that he's got right now. So I love the fact that he's got that pressure on his shoulders right now. Let's talk about the goal. Go ahead, Danny.
I just one last thing. I just think that there are other coaches in the Premier League that are actually one step ahead of Guardiola. We go back to the Liverpool-Manchester City game. Manchester City expected Liverpool to go for them. Expected them to go for them from the first minute. So they set up to go long at times. Manchester City. Liverpool. So
maybe it's a lack of respect for his fellow coaches that are on the bench coming up against him. Maybe he doesn't think about them.
If you take Simeone out of the equation and Enrique and possibly Zidane, you have the ultimate coaches in the Premier League, the best coaches in the Premier League, and that's what he's coming up against now. And that it's the same problem that Mourinho had. Everybody said Mourinho's lost his touch. No, Mourinho hasn't lost his touch. It's just when he was here and the rest of them were there, they've all gone like this now, and it's exactly the same with Guardiola. So he now has to up his game even more.
Donny, is there anything, just quickly, mate, anything you can do in January beyond Gabby Jesus to change things?
Oh, it's a tough one because I think it's more than that really. I think he'll be wanting another centre back. I think he'll be wanting another defensive midfielder. The problem is that Guardiola has is that in the Premier League you can't have just one defensive midfielder like a Busquets. You either have two like Busquets or you have an out and out dominant one who will break up everything, which is what Chelsea do, but they're doing it with two.
But let me ask you on that, just sorry before we move on, because he has this bizarre thing that he does with his defenders, his defensive midfielders. If you look at Barcelona, he took Mascherano, who was a defensive midfielder, and turned him into a centre half. At Bayern Munich, he took Alaba and Philipp Lahm and turned them into defensive midfielders. If you look at City, he's taken Zabaleta and putting him as a centre half. Why does he insist on playing these players out of position?
That's something that he believes he can do, but I go back to age. It's difficult to do that at a certain age. And I think that one of the things is as well with Guardiola is that we knew his Barcelona team in particular, 4-3-3, 4-3-3, 4-3-3. That's the way they played. One of the biggest standout things for me that showed me that Guardiola was fearful of the opposition was when he played against Chelsea. He changed to a three at the back. Now, if you're a player in that dressing room, it doesn't matter whether you're Manchester City. And I've been at teams before where you're in the dressing room, the manager says, right, okay, we're going to line up a different system than what we're used to because we're worried about them. Straight away, you're like, our manager's really, really worried about them because not only are you trying to nullify them, but by playing a different system, you're actually nullifying yourself. And that's what he did against Chelsea. And okay, people can say, well, if De Bruyne had put the ball into the back of the net, it would have been a masterstroke, a masterclass from Guardiola. But he didn't. And Chelsea came back and won the game. So there's a real fear factor towards Chelsea. And Guardiola, I still don't think he knows his best system. We've seen him 4-2-3-1 again today, 4-1-4-1. He keeps changing. He doesn't know his ideal system, never mind his ideal 11.
So regardless, we see 3 points go to Manchester City. Burnley certainly put the pressure on, as you mentioned, Danny. They had a lot of good opportunities in the game to pull a point from that matchup. But they're now 7 points behind Chelsea, who are sitting pretty at the top of the table. We've seen over the last 48 hours a lot of games going on in the Premier League. There's a lot being asked of these players through the Christmas period. You've experienced it yourself as a player. It's never easy to go through that Christmas period in the Championship or even in the lower leagues all the way through to the Premier League like we've seen right now. This is a lot to ask of Premier League elite footballers now, to play 2 high-tempo, high-energy games in the top flight within 48 hours. Is it a little too crazy to ask?
I don't think it is, Ian. It was really interesting. I listened to an interview with Tony Pulis after his game today. 2 fantastic results. They beat Southampton away and then beat Hull at home today. Came from behind to beat Hull. And he said, if players cannot play 2 games in 48 hours, then it's time to give up. Because for me, when I look at what's entailed to get it, it's something that really frustrates the life out of me. Because I used to get asked the question at Christmas, is it too much to be playing? The only thing, I don't think you will ever hear players saying, I don't want to play 2 games in 48 hours. What we have now is people behind the scenes, all these, the fitness coaches and the medical staff that really do run the shows at the football clubs. They talk about players being in red zones.
Right.
And basically what it should be, if I'm the manager and I say to you, Ian, are you okay to play? And you say to me, yes, I am, Gaffer. Then I'll go, right, you're playing. Because you will never, ever have I heard a player say, no, I'm too tired to play. Never. The only reason players feel as though that they're too tired to play is if you have the medical staff, the fitness people coming up to you and going, you're in your red zone. I think you need a rest today. You can't play. So I think it's a mentality thing.
So what determines you're in the red zone, Danny?
What toll does it take on your body, though? I don't understand that. You talk about a red zone. Like, surely at some point over that Christmas period, I mean, we're talking 9-10 games throughout the month of December. If you're in the Champions League, European competition, I mean, that must be brutal for your body.
What is a red zone, though? Seriously.
But I think basically it's a red zone where your body is becoming a little bit susceptible to injury. I think that's what it is more than anything. But if you ask a player, what would they rather do? Would they rather have would they rather play Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, or even around Christmas? Or would they rather do a running session? Every single one of them will tell you, I would rather play a game. Sure. I think it's something that is very special in England. I think it's something that shouldn't be stopped. And you know what? I'd probably go ahead and say, all these managers and people that are moaning, saying there's too many games, I'd ask this question. If there was if there was a winter break in England, where would the players be going?
I'll tell you exactly what happened. No. Clubs would fill it up with money spending friendlies. Exactly. And they'd send them all over the world, and they'd be going and playing in Dubai, and they'd be going and playing all over the place.
I don't agree with both of you there. What I'm saying right now, obviously, I'm following a lot of the Bundesliga players right now, and I'm looking at Aubameyang and Lewandowski, and all these players right now are enjoying themselves over the Christmas period with their families and their friends. They're going back to their hometown. Some are spending time in Miami. Mario Götze, I'm watching him. He's in Dubai doing his training. I mean, it sounds like that they're actually giving themselves an opportunity to recuperate. Now, it's never easy. I knew myself as a player playing 2-3 games in a week was always going to be difficult for me. I was always suspect to having hamstring problems, and that caused me a lot of problems. So I always had to play maybe 1 game a week, and that was enough for me. But playing more than that, like we're asking the players, I mean, 10 games in a December, I think the winter break is actually good. I've experienced that as a player. It was always great to just switch off from league play and then come back in the January, do a little preseason, and back at it again.
Samir Nasri has been spending quality time, I hear, in LA at the Drip Doctors.
the two best players in the world at the moment, Messi, Ronaldo, yeah? Mm-hmm. I think I may stand to be corrected, but I think last season them two played near enough as many games as anybody in European football. They have a winter break as well. And I just think that for me, it's a situation where I wouldn't have a winter break. What I would say is get the Christmas period out of the way and then say, right, what we do, we change the FA Cup and you make it a little bit further on, or you bring another Premier League game during the week and give them 2 weeks off like it's an international break or something like that. But I just think that a big thing is made, which is caused, I think, by people behind the scenes saying you're in the red zone and what have you. Whereas if you don't say anything to a player, they will just get on with it. There's been a lot of teams that have had 2 wins out of 2 in the Premier League. And Tony Pulis, he said it as it was. He said 20 years ago, there was still the Christmas schedule and teams had 1 substitute. There was never any moaning then. So for me,
but would he be saying the same thing if his team had lost both of those games, though, Danny?
He always said it to us at Stoke. and we had
Good.
atrocious Christmases. So
Danny, let me ask you something. Because I think Marcus Rojo tried to get sent off prior to Christmas to get the Christmas break off and go back to Argentina. Have you at any time in your career ever seen a footballer get an intentional yellow card to get a break, or have you ever been direct? Has a manager ever directed a player and said, "Go get booked here, son, so you can skip the next game"?
You put me on the spot here,
Yes,
aren't
Dan.
you? Yeah, I was when I was a kid, and I started getting involved with at Manchester United. Like I say, a long time ago now. They were in the Champions League, and I just started traveling with them. And I can't remember who the game was against now. It may have been Croatia Zagreb. Like I say, don't quote me on this. And there was two players at the time. I think it might have been Paul Scholes, and I think it was David Beckham at the time. Two of the most important players for Manchester United. They'd already qualified for the next round. But they were on one yellow card each. So that meant if they got a next yellow card, they would probably miss the first leg of the following round of games, or the following league, or whatever it was then in the Champions League. And they were told, go and get a yellow card, which is something I would do as a manager, because they're gonna miss a game that's meaningless at that time. And Paul Scholes, we know how he used to like to tackle, used to like to get stuck in and things like that. And sometimes his tackles are a little bit over the edge. So when he's told to go and get a yellow card, you just think, oh, he's just gonna go through somebody and get that yellow card. And I think I watched him and I seen him go into this challenge, and it's one of the best challenges I've ever seen. He won the ball. He won everything, and he didn't get booked. So I think at the end, him and David Beckham, if I remember right, just ended up handling the ball. But that for me is completely different than a player coming out and saying, I want to miss Christmas. I've never seen anything like that. For me, if I was a manager and I had a situation where I had two such important players for my team, that I knew that it was okay for them to miss the next game because it was the last round of the Champions League games, then without question, I would be saying, listen, do us a favour. You're not going to play in that game, but let's get booked here to make sure that everything's then clean. Your slate is wiped clean.
Start again.
You miss the next game, and away we go then in the next round. And that is something for me that is not an issue. But talking about players missing Christmas, I look at Diego Costa and Kante. I think that was also because people go on about, Costa lives on the edge. Costa doesn't live on the edge. He's a very, very clever individual. He knows how far to take it. And I think they looked at the Christmas period and said, right, if you're going to get a yellow card, get the yellow card so you miss the Bournemouth game. Him and Kante.
That's a great point. And I mean, it's always great to hear it from former players that players don't really come out to the media and say we're playing too many times, because every single professional that I have played with, they want to play. They don't want to train. They want to be on the field as much as they possibly can. They want to train. They want to train as minimal as they can over that Christmas period so that they can get out onto the field and enjoy it and feel fresh. So it's great to hear it from a former professional player who's experienced it in the Premier League, going through that Christmas period. It's nice to hear.
From me to you as well, Ian, because obviously you're a former player.
Yeah.
Have you ever said to a manager, I'm too tired to play?
No, I've never experienced.
Exactly.
The only time I would ever say to a manager, I don't want to play, is whether I was on the brink of pulling the hamstring again. That was the only time. If I thought I was going to get an injury, I'd be smart enough to know, like, I've got to pull myself out of this one, which happened quite a lot through my career. And I've seen a lot of players go through their careers never wanting to miss a minute. Whether they're injured, whether they were going to miss weddings, they were going to miss the birth of their children. They never wanted to miss a minute. So it's great to see professionals want to play like that. The players have done it tremendously so. And what we watched over the Premier League Christmas period was simply outstanding. It was a great opportunity for me personally to sit back and watch the Premier League, having focused on the Bundesliga with Fox all season. It's been great. The product's excellent. The competition level is incredibly high. And I feel like there's a lot of teams right now who are running away at the top of that table from the rest of the pack who are fighting at the bottom of the table. There's a big gap now between the top and the bottom. The team that's come out on top for me over that Christmas period has got to be Chelsea, with the way that they're picking up these victories time and time and time again. It's great to watch.
Yeah, and And I think if you look at the other results as well, you look at Liverpool drawing today, they've lost points. Huge game tomorrow between Chelsea and Tottenham at Tottenham. That is a must-win game for Tottenham. It's as simple as that. Tottenham need to win that game. It's going to be a magnificent game, just to see how everything's developing. I think
they're in great form as well.
Oh yeah, they're really coming to the show now. I think what everybody's waiting for is Chelsea's first slip up to see how they react, because they're on a magnificent run at the moment. But everyone's saying, well, what happens when they slip up? Well, what happens if they slip up? I think that's more to go about it, because they'll fancy their chances going to Tottenham without question. The confidence they're in, but Tottenham will also fancy themselves as well, and they'll have a score to settle as well after last season when Chelsea came back and drew 2-2 with them.
When I look at Chelsea, a couple of things. First of all, to me, it's not a big squad. Mourinho never liked working off a big squad, and it hasn't really changed that much. They're quite. There isn't a massive rotation of goal scorers in that team. They're quite dependent on 2 or 3 players. Is that a potential weakness for Chelsea?
It depends on what position they get injuries. I think
of course
one of the most. I think it could well be the problem that you have, though, Phil, is that if I was to say to you, Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Manchester City, if you name all their top strikers, so we've got Aguero, Ibrahimovic, Costa, Sanchez, and Harry Kane. Okay, just look at and Liverpool, really, they play with a front 3, so they're a little bit different. But them 5 teams that I've mentioned, and I say to you about all them centre forwards, if you name me their next centre forward after that, there's a big quality difference. But that's because of the simple fact you're not going to get 2 world-class players in a team that play 2 world-class centre forwards in a team that play a 4-2-3-1, because one of them's not going to sit on the bench. So he's shown that he can deal with it. He doesn't seem to fancy Batshuayi. He ended up playing one of the midfielders higher up the pitch. I think one of your biggest problems would be if Alonso got injured, the left wing back, because they haven't got a like-for-like replacement for him.
Brilliant.
What about Paul Clement? Now the news is just breaking that he's probably going to be the next Swansea manager. And it's an interesting decision for me, with him having his experience at Derby County and obviously already experienced English football as an assistant. He's been at the highest level, or the elite level, as an assistant as well. But now getting the opportunity in the Premier League with Swansea, is this the right man to go for?
I can see why they've done it. They have a brand of football, Swansea, that they are known for, that they like to play, which Paul Clement did at Derby County to differences of success. I'll tell you now, they're not going to play their way out of trouble.
Nope.
Not a chance. No way. They have to roll their sleeves up and they have to scrap their way out of it. Believe me. I remember when I was at about a year ago, I went down to Sunderland, and Sunderland were in a relegation fight then. And I saw Wes Brown after the game, and I was speaking to him, because obviously he'd only seen it from the top. He'd seen it all the time when you're challenging to win titles. And I said to him, how are you enjoying your time here? He said, Danny, I'm loving it. He said, but for me, I've had a few years of this now, and it is more than enough. It's a completely different. It's a different game down the bottom of the league. You cannot play your way out of it. You come off the pitch every single game unable to move. You've got nothing more to give. So therefore, you need players that are going to battle, that are going to roll their sleeves up. You don't have to look at Crystal Palace and the appointment in Sam Allardyce. Fantastic appointment. Scoring loads of goals, but conceding too many. That's what they need to do. They need to build from the back. Because defences keep you in leagues. Forwards win your championships. It's as simple.
What do you think of that, Phil? Do you like Paul Clement and move for Swansea? Why?
I think, first of all, I think in that position, you need experience more than any other position.
Right.
Last 6 months of the season, you need someone to keep you up. You need someone that's going to motivate players. Paul Clement, it doesn't have the experience. I'll talk to an individual who worked with Paul Clement, and his response to me was, Paul Clement is a great coach. He's not a great manager. He walks around with a clipboard. He's very much like a Brian Kidd to me. I can understand why he took the job. But to come into Swansea, that just like Danny says, the first thing you have to do is get that defense right. I don't see any players in that Swansea team that are willing to roll up their sleeves and fight. They've got some lovely players. Borja Baston, they've got the big lad up front, the big Spanish striker, Llorente. They've got some lovely players, but when I look at that defense, they're all over the place. And so I think maybe where Clement helps you is that if he can lean on one or two of his old clubs to give him a couple of players, he has a maybe. But again,
why would they make a move like this, though? I don't get this, though. When you look after Bob Bradley, it was a gamble. Now it seems to me like they're taking another gamble with a man who's not got that experience.
I also want to say something that, Danny, you said this in your article in The Sun about players that are going to come in on loan. The problem is when you get players that come in on loan, they're going back to their parent clubs in 6 months. You can't get them to care. You can't. I mean, it's a gamble. So if you're coming in on loan to Swansea, like Paul Clement, if Paul Clement gets one or two lads from Bayern Munich or whatever, how much do they really going to care about Swansea and keeping them up?
You can't get loan players. I don't believe it. I remember when we were at Stoke City, 2008-2009 season, what Tony Pulis did in the January transfer window, and even in the summer window, he brought in players that he believed had a point to prove. And it maybe lost the way a little bit, and he could get them back on track. And he knew if he could get them back on track, that then he would have Premier League players.
Yeah.
In the January transfer window, he went out and signed James Beattie, who had been prolific at Southampton, had done well at Everton, was now at Sheffield United in the Championship. James Beattie was a Premier League player, and he wanted the chance to prove that again. He came in and did that. He also signed Matty Everington from West Ham, that wasn't playing week in, week out at West Ham, but we knew he was a Premier League player. So Tony Pulis signed these two players and said to him, listen, here's a platform for you. Go and prove that you are still Premier League players. And them two, just with their icing on top of the cake that made us stay in the Premier League. So it's all about the players that you sign. Loan signing is very, very difficult. I had it at Southampton. We signed a load of loan players, and at times some of the lads were arguing with them because it didn't mean as much to them, not on purpose, but it just wasn't their football club. It wasn't going to affect them whether we went down or not.
But Danny, don't you have the same problem with players that are too good? If you look at Swansea and they've got a couple of players where they're like, it's March, if we go down, I'm going to do a Jermaine Defoe here, I'm going to put a transfer request down the sack. I mean, don't you have the same problem?
I guess you do, but it's up to the manager then to not play them players.
But the point I'm making is the players. I mean, in the past, players would go down to the Championship with their clubs. Obviously, you can't do that financially anymore. When you look at the players, the top players, I know you've sort of answered this before, but do they care as much as they used to 20 years ago?
I think so. I think there's different levels now because the money is so extreme in the Premier League. A lot of teams now. What you have to remember is that Swansea, for example, and some of the other teams down there probably will not have clauses in contracts that say if we get relegated, you're losing a percentage of your wages. Hull you can guarantee will because they've just been promoted.
Right.
Sunderland possibly because of the situation that they found themselves in numerous years, but some of the other clubs won't. So I think what you have to do now, if you're a Swansea, you have to fill your team full of grafters. You have to fill your team full of players that you know are going to run for a brick wall for you. Yeah. They may not be the most talented, but you know that they're going to scrap for everything, for every single point that Swansea City can get to stay in the league. And that's the best hope of them getting out of it. But the thing is with Paul Clement, all the respect to him, I saw him at Derby County. I think he's up there as one of the best coaches around.
Yeah.
But as you said, Phil, does that make him a top manager? The answer is yet to be found, I guess.
Yeah, there's a big battle going on at the bottom of the Premier League right now, and there's a great matchup coming with the two teams that we've just been talking about, Swansea away to Crystal Palace. That's more than a 3-pointer for both of those sides. They're desperate for the points, but they need to try and get that confidence back in amongst the camps. I think you're right with the Sam Allardyce appointment at Crystal Palace, though. He seems to be the right fit. They score a lot of goals. They need to shut up shop. If they do shut up shop and they start to be much more difficult to play against and score goals against, they should be okay, Palace.
Yeah, I think they will be. These are horrible games to play in. Awful games to play in.
Yeah.
Because you know there's so much riding on it. You can feel the nervousness from the supporters, from the players. And they're great if you win them because it just gives you that edge over them. But If you lose the game, then it's awful because it's a relegation rival. And I fancy Crystal Palace big time. I think that Crystal Palace will comfortably get out of the little bit of a relegation scrap that they're in because of the manager that they've got there. I felt a little bit for Alan Pardew because what he did, he saw last season it was role reversal. They had a decent defence but couldn't score goals. But he's changed it very quickly. All of a sudden, they're scoring a lot of goals now but conceding a lot. And for you to score 4 goals and not win games is incredible. And that's something that I think the owners have looked at and said, right, well, Sam Allardyce, he can still get them scoring goals, but what he'll do is make us stronger at the back.
For Manchester United away to West Ham today, it was a big game for United and they came away with the 3 points, but it wasn't without controversy. 15 minutes in, Feghouli.
Ian, we lost you there, mate.
Player times, can you hear me?
Got you back, go ahead.
Okay, players going through different times through the Christmas period. Now we're seeing maybe some simple mistakes from referees, especially big game decisions. 15 minutes in, Feghouli gets that red card. Didn't look to me like it was the right decision. What are your thoughts on it?
The ridiculous refereeing. Once again, referees having an impact on the outcome of a game. You know, we've talked about 2 games in 48 hours for players. I don't know what it's like for a referee. I would imagine who aren't in the same type of pristine condition a footballer is. It's difficult. But for me, too many games this season in the Premier League are being affected by referees getting simple decisions right. The Ibrahimovic goal, how have they not seen that's offside? It's offside a mile. I look at the Arsenal City game when, for me, at least one of City's goals was offside in that game. That cost Arsenal 3 points, no, at least a point in that game, possibly 2 goals. The sending off, it's never a sending off. It's a yellow card. If even that. And I just think, I look at so many games that I'm watching, refereeing's a hard job, and I think that two things need to happen. I want to see referees explain their decisions because I want there to be some degree of accountability. And I think the idea that I want to see technology. The game is so fast now. What it would take to look at that Ibrahimovic offside and to look allow a challenge a half, because most games don't have more than 2 contentious decisions against you in a game. The Liverpool game, Emre Can, that's a handball. Sunderland should have had a penalty from that. Liverpool, I think, should have had a penalty as well. I just think major decisions are going against teams that have crucial outcomes.
I don't want to see any more technology. There's been a few situations. So, for example, the Jamie Vardy, the sending off that he had at Stoke City, which the Leicester supporters were perplexed at, and so were the Leicester City squad and the management. When you first see it, it looks like a sending off. You see the second angle, it looks like a yellow card. You see the third angle, and it looks as though he's actually been pulled back. So that was something really that I looked at and thought, I think we've got enough technology. Now, what I would say is that the problem that we have is that too many rules are open to interpretation. So we're talking about the offside rule. In a split second, a linesman has to decide, is this player interfering? Is he in the way of the ball coming in? It's daft. So what you need to do is simplify everything. If you are offside, you are offside. As simple as that. If you can't get yourself back on an onside position, then more fool you. That for me is a problem. Because of it, there's a real lack of consistency within the game because so many of the rules are open to interpretation.
But Donny, here's the problem. Mark Halsey said earlier this season he's been told by the PGMOL to say that he hasn't seen things. To say that he's seen things that he hasn't seen, so that you have a situation where if a referee sees something, you can't go back and look at it, even if he's got it wrong, blatantly wrong. We have a situation that's unbelievable to me, that you've got referees saying, say you saw it, so that we don't have to look at it again. Surely, if we're not going to allow technology into the game, which is fine, we must surely have a situation where after the fact, Dan Fletcher missed the European Cup final because of a sending off in the semi-final against Arsenal. That was never a sending off. He never got to play another one again in his life. surely we have to have a situation where we look at technology after the game. If the referee got something wrong, it's okay to say that you got it wrong. We're going to go back and fix it. It doesn't undermine the referee. I would do that, and I would also say if someone blatantly dives in a game, because in football it's only cheating if you get caught. If someone blatantly dives in a game, then I would suspend them afterwards.
Yeah, definitely, because then you can have retrospective action. For me, what I would say, and it was something that I said earlier on in the season, is that there's no accountability. So, for example, a player, I had many stinkers during my career, and we'd get beat. I had to go and face the press afterwards and deal with the questions. Same with the managers.
Yeah.
So what I would say is at the start of every season, you have 10 independent journalists, and what they do after every game, they interview the referee, but they follow the same referees around. Okay.
Right.
After every game, they interview each individual referee, not to have a dig at him, not to pull out his bad points or anything like that. Also to commend him when he's made the right choice. Now, what you will see after 4, 5, 6 games is a pattern. Is this referee continuously saying to me, I didn't see it? Is this referee continuously getting the wrong decisions? Is he saying this? Because at the moment, there's no accountability.
Yeah,
and the other thing that really riles me is that how dare a referee have a bad game in the Premier League and get demoted to the Championship or League One?
I know. How disrespectful is that?
How can you do that? What does that say about the Championship or League One? It's disgusting.
Yeah, I agree with you.
What does that say?
I want to pick on you a little bit, Danny, though, about your opinion on technology. You say you don't want any more technology coming into the game.
Not than what
But you just explained already that from one angle you see one challenge. From the second and the third, it's completely different. It can look like a red card on the first angle, which may be the referee's position. He produces that red card. The linesman doesn't agree with it, but the referee's the man who makes the decision, so he produces that red card if he doesn't consult with his assistant on the side. And from the third angle, it didn't even look like it was a yellow card or no card at all. So why don't you think that technology, let's say it's someone sitting up in the stands who's got a monitor with all different replays on it, can have communication with the referee in an instant? Why don't you want to see something like that brought into the game?
Because which one of them 3 replays would you have stood by?
But if the guy in the stands got 3 different replays and he can see it within 10, 15 seconds and he can immediately communicate with his referee, why would you not want him making that decision? Why would you want it to be the man in the middle having the accountability and it be the wrong decision?
Because I think with the 3 angles that you see, if I'm saying that one looked like a red card, one looked like a yellow card, and the third one looked as though he was actually fouled, which one would you go off? That's why I'm saying that 3 would not actually have made it any better. It would have just clouded the water even more. So that's where I'm a little bit stuck with that, because I think what we see is that there are a lot of mistakes being made by referees, and they're the ones that are pointed out. Whereas a lot of the time, referees are making the correct decisions. I just think if we bring more technology in, I think you're leaving more areas even grey, because I've seen probably 3 or 4 sendings off this season where I've gone, that's an awful challenge. It doesn't look that bad, actually. Right. I can't believe he should just have been booked for that. So it's really difficult.
How do you think referees feel about this? Do you think they want more technology?
100%.
I think they would. I think personally they would probably, like Ian said, I think that they would probably take more technology because it takes a little bit of heat off them.
Yeah.
When you have UEFA putting more men behind the goal, rather than introducing technology, to me, you're just introducing more opinions into what's happening and increase the probability that you're going to get something wrong. Personally, when you see most of these controversial incidents that are wrong, there's maybe a 30-second period after it where players are arguing with a referee and screaming and shouting. That's all it takes for me. You're not going to get every one of them right. Sometimes these replays are not going to be conclusive, but I think with video evidence, you're going to get much more than right than what you're getting right now. And I think that with the game today and with what's at stake, in terms of jobs, in terms of resources and everything.
Finances.
We should do everything we can to get the seasons right.
But let's look at what's already been introduced into the game right now, right? We've seen the referee getting help with goal line technology.
Yeah, good point.
And I'm old school. I like it to be absolutely nothing. I want the referee to be the man accountable for all of it. So I prefer the old school look at it. But I'm definitely buying into goal line technology in the way they've mastered it, because today we've seen two great examples of it. There's no way the referee, or in my opinion, even the linesman, would have been able to catch that full ball had crossed the line. To me, from my naked eye, it looked like they were both no goals. But you could clearly see on the goal line technology that both of those had crossed the line, and the referee immediately knew that it was a goal.
Not one wrong decision on goal line technology, and it hasn't interrupted the game at all.
Right.
But as three of us are here now, would we be debating like we are?
No,
So the one thing I would say to you, Phil, is that I think I'm the only person on the planet that thought it was right for Ibrahimovic's goal to be chalked off. I got stick after the game.
Hold on, my earpieces is faulty here.
You thought that it was right.
What'd you say? Yeah,
right for Ibrahimovic's which one?
The against Borough.
Yes, yeah. I was doing a commentary on the game, and at the time, everybody was going crazy. There was loads of people on Twitter saying, "I can't believe the referees made that decision." I was doing the commentary of the game, and I'm holding my hands up and said, "I agreed with the referee, and I still agree with him now," because at one point his feet are so high. If that's near anybody's head, that takes their head off.
He's 5 feet. He's 5 feet from Valdez, and Valdez is coming with his hands. I can understand that Valdez is a defender and he's got his head in there. And Valdez is a small keeper. Right after, I think it was the second half, he also gave a high feet for George Friend
against
diving header
from a corner. Yeah, which was wrong.
Right.
That was wrong.
So I think, I mean, to me, if that was the other way, I'd give it. I'm saying here that Ibrahimovic's goal today should never have counted. That's not dangerous play to me. But you know, it's not the worst decision in the world. I mean, at least you can see why he gave it. But to me, I think you know, maybe he doesn't change his mind on video evidence. Maybe he still looks at that and says, "Look, that's still dangerous play to me. That's okay." But I just feel there's major decisions that we have a responsibility to get right, especially when you're talking about players getting suspended for cup finals and, you know, World Cup finals and European Cup finals, things they'll never reach again in their life. I think
I don't think we can satisfy everyone on that, though. I think it's difficult to satisfy everyone. Obviously, Danny has his opinion different to yours, Phil.
Absolutely.
I'm a little bit in the middle, so it's never easy to get everybody happy with the technology coming into the game, because it's only 10, 15 years ago there was no technology coming into the game, and it didn't even look like it was going to come into the game. So it does ruin a lot of the talking points. And I understand your point, Danny, that we wouldn't be debating if it wasn't for goal.
There'd be no debate in football.
Yeah. And I agree with that.
I don't want to get to that. Yeah, I don't want to get to that point, because everybody, you know, when we're saying about the winter break in England,
yeah,
the main reason there's not a winter break because it's a traditional thing in this country.
No,
the
I agree
supporters
with that.
love it. Now, after a game, whether it be an 8 o'clock kickoff, a 3 o'clock kickoff, 12:45, whatever it may be, you can guarantee that afterwards you've got sets of supporters in a pub having a beer, debating. I can't believe that goal was given. I can't believe that goal was given. What would supporters debate about afterwards? I know people are saying there's a lot of money in football and things like that. Well, you know what made the referees better?
Yeah, but don't you think that it's about who wins and loses football games, who plays well, who scores goals, who makes mistakes in games? It's not necessarily always about the controversial decisions that bring talking points in football.
Maybe, listen, okay, let's say that. Let's keep your point. But maybe, Danny, we can have it to where at the end, you can't change what happens during the game, but if at the end of the game we see something it's blatantly wrong, you can't go back and change the score, but somebody's been sent off that shouldn't have been sent off.
Yes.
Let's go back and fix that. Somebody's dived during the game and cheated. Let's go suspend them.
Retrospective.
Yeah, I think at the very least, football should be doing that and saying,
I
if
agree
we
with
see
that.
something on the video afterwards,
But we're seeing a lot of that, Phil, in Major League Soccer right now, where
yeah,
we're seeing challenges going in, and Major League Soccer have an office in New
yeah,
York City with 4 or 5 former players and technical directors or whoever it may be, maybe
yeah.
even some executives who have never even played the game, Phil, and they're going back, they're reviewing challenges and handing out suspensions and fines to these players.
I
This
think
is
they're
2 or 3
very
days after games.
yeah.
There's a thin line.
Major League Soccer is being proactive about it, but
Right.
it's easier for them to make changes in a league that's still, I'm not saying a fledgling league, but in the English Premier League, you're dealing with so much history, so much tradition. It's harder to make changes.
The problem, one of the most bizarre rules that we have in this country is that you can get retrospective action if you haven't been booked.
Or yeah,
I
or
find-
because
find
that means the referee saw it.
Yeah,
then,
but it's still
that's madness to me. I know, I agree.
You should have retrospective action if it's something that needs to be seen, whether you've been yellow carded or not, because maybe, like you say, the referee hasn't seen it. He's just gone, oh, there must have been a bad challenge there, to be on the safe side, I'll just give a yellow card.
No, it's a great talking point, and we could go on for hours, and I'm sure we'll get back to it over time as well, because it's a great debate whether we should have more technology or not. Let's get back to Manchester United's performance, Phil. I know you were delighted that there were so many games over the Christmas period because you've never left your sofa and you've watched every single minute of it. I know
wouldn't have left it
exactly
anyway.
that.
No danger.
Manchester United played today, and we did see the controversial decisions, but I also thought there was one decision in that match from Jose Mourinho, and that was bringing on Marcus Rashford that actually changed the game because he had an immediate impact.
Well, he's been doing that for quite a while. His substitutions are very, very different to Van Hal's. Look, when United needed to win games last season, they were bringing on Fellaini. This season, they're bringing on Fellaini to win games. You saw it against Borough. Fellaini comes off, all positive substitutions. Rashford comes on today, changes the game. That kid has got so much more to his game than goals. So it's all positive. United's transitions are much faster. I can't see a way back in that team for Wayne Rooney. I think United are much faster without him. And I think what you're seeing with United is now a belief that they're going to score. They're not looking for excuses to lose. Things go against them, they keep going. And I think it's a Manchester United team that all great managers for me get the best out of players and get them to play slightly above themselves. This is the best form for Phil Jones's career at United. Rojo's playing above himself. Valencia is one of the best right backs in the league, and he's not a right back. Pogba's finding his form. Ibrahimovic is one of the top goal scorers in Europe. Martial's playing like he had a point to prove. So to me, I think this is for real.
When I look back at Manchester United, the great teams that they've had over the years, with the likes of the match winners that they had in the team, that's something that's been missing for quite a few years now. You know, you go back through the different eras. So you go back to your Scholes, your Beckhams, your Coles, your Yorks, your Solskjaers, your Sheringham's, your Giggs. Then you move on to the next type of era. You had your Rooneys, your Ronaldos, your Van Nistelrooys, your Tevez's, and players like that. Manchester United have had a void for about 3 years where I'm not saying they haven't had match winners, but they've not had loads of them like they've been used to. I was doing the Middlesbrough game, and at one point towards the end of the game, Mkhitaryan, Martial, Mata, Ibrahimovic, Pogba, Herrera, all on the pitch at the same time. That is an embarrassment of riches. And like Phil's just said, to be able to bring players on. Today was a prime example, Mata's goal. One substitute to the next substitute into the back of the net. Now, that for me tells you that Manchester United are getting back to where they used to be in terms of match winners. They, over the last 3-4 years, I'd say they probably had 2-3 match winners. And if they didn't do it, then it was going to be 0-0 or they'd get beat. Whereas now I look and I think, you know what? Manchester United got 6 or 7 match winners within that 18 that can come on and make a difference, or actually be on the pitch and make a difference.
What did it feel like in the Premier League, Danny? And you can talk about this. A great example is your time at Manchester United. You always had Ole Gunnar Solskjaer able to come off the bench and grab you a goal, and an important goal with that. What's it like as a player on the field when you know the scoreline's 0-0 or you're 1-0 behind, you're desperate for a goal, and you know you've got a little goal scorer on the bench who's that impact player when he comes off the bench? It must be a great feeling to have.
My experiences, like I say, I played a few games for Manchester United, but a lot of my experiences were actually against Manchester United. So you'd think, you know what, you're having a good game. You're having a good game. Everything's going all right. And then all of a sudden you see Solskjaer coming on. You see Teddy Sheringham coming on. You see a Cole or a York coming on, or you see Van Nistelrooy going off, but he's being replaced by somebody who can also do what he can do. It's scary. Manchester United used to have a real, when we used to go to Old Trafford with the different teams I went with, Manchester United used to have a way of giving you a false sense of security. You'd go there and they were the best team, one of the best teams in Europe, certainly the best team in England at the time. The first 15, 20 minutes, you'd get the ball and you'd be like, I tell you what, this is good. Manchester United aren't all they're cracked up to be. You know, everyone's been saying they're really good, but look at the possession rather than the ball. 20 minutes, 25 minutes, you're 3-0 down. Like, what's happened there? They used to lead you into a false sense of security consistently, which was let them get comfortable and then bang. And Manchester United now, what it's starting to get back, which has been missing for 3 years now, is that fear factor where teams are actually beaten in the tunnel before they actually get out on the pitch. And that's something that Manchester United haven't had for a long time, but it's starting to come back.
Is there any other team in the Premier League, Phil, you can also jump on this one. Is there any other team in the Premier League right now that is exactly what you just explained about Manchester United, where you know that they've potentially won the match before they've even got on the field?
For me, as an attacking team, I would say Liverpool. I would say when I look at Liverpool, they don't have, to me, the same level of quality. But when I look at Liverpool going forward, I always think there's goals in that team. I always think Mane is excellent for them. Coutinho's excellent for them. Sturridge, if you can keep him fit, will get you goals. I think that Liverpool right now are a team that frightens teams going forward. United have more quality up front than Liverpool, but the way Liverpool play, I think all they're missing right now is a quality centre half and a quality goalkeeper.
Yeah, but yet again, they drop points at Sunderland. You know, isn't that the biggest difference when you've got a Liverpool side that is so exciting? And I agree with you; they're entertaining to watch, and very similar to the Borussia Dortmund side that Klopp has as well. They're dynamic, they're energetic, they've got youth, they've got experience, they've got a great mix amongst them. But that little difference, Danny, is a big gap between what Liverpool are right now and Liverpool being a championship-winning side. Do you think that is a big gap?
I think that today is. I think today is probably a situation where nobody expected. You know, give full credit to Sunderland for getting the draw. You know, you've got to give them great credit for that, and they're fighting. They're fighting for their lives, no doubt about it. But what I like about Liverpool is when you look at that front six. The front five, because Henderson, he was very, very much missed today against Sunderland. So look at the front five. So you have the front three and the two either side of the one either side of Henderson. For me, the beauty of the way that Liverpool plays, that them five that are playing in front of Henderson, they can play in any position. We've seen Lallana play in midfield. We've seen Lallana play up front, through the middle, on the right. We've seen Firmino play on at the front and on the left. We've seen Wijnaldum play as a defensive midfielder, as an attacking midfielder. So even though that front five may stay the same at times, they can intertwine. They can change all the time. There's no doubt about it. But as you said, Ian, the difference between them winning the Premier League and being also Rans could be the defensive side of things, because you look at the team at the top of the league at the moment, Chelsea under Mourinho a few years ago when they won the Premier League, best defence, not highest goal scorers.
Donny, let me ask you something that Jurgen Klopp said. Klopp criticised Gary Neville, criticised other pundits, saying ex-players forget what it's like to be players and what criticism feels like. But don't you have a job as a pundit to criticize players if they need criticized? You're not Jurgen Klopp. You're not Liverpool manager. Surely Lawrence Karius and Simon Mignolet have to have thicker skins and to be worrying about what Gary Neville and Jimmy Carragher are saying. Would that be a concern to you?
I think you and me have had a conversation about this before, which is there are different people in the media world that will do things differently. Some are very forthright. Some will go about it a different way. It is each to their own. Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, they believe that what they said wasn't a problem. And you know what? Maybe Jurgen Klopp saw it that it wasn't a problem because Mignolet was soon back into the team.
Right.
I just think that players, you have to have thick skins. Myself personally, I like to think that I'm more of a person that will be constructive with criticism. Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, for me, the two best pundits at the moment in England, without question. I think they are absolutely sensational. They have a fantastic partnership with themselves, and they have a certain way of getting things across. But it's each to their own, really, as in terms of people that work in the media, the pundit side of things, former players.
How do you feel about it, Danny? Because you're an ex-pro, you played with a lot of players who are still currently playing right now, and we've already heard what John Terry thought of criticism he received from Robbie Savage, who was an also ran. I mean, it's not necessarily easy being an analyst in this world.
I believe that the way I always look at things, right, I put myself in the player's position. So if I'm going to give constructive criticism to an individual player, if that was said about me, am I okay with it? If I was to say it to the player's face, does he understand it? If it's no, then I probably wouldn't do it. But that's just me as an individual. That doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just I like to go about. I always feel at times that there's something deeper. So recently, John Stones has been getting a lot of stick, and so's Bravo. They've been getting stick as in terms of £50 million weighted on this player, and this goalkeeper can only use his feet. No. Let's look at the bigger picture. Yes, they're individuals in a team, but as a defensive unit, defending from the front, can they not do it better to make sure that Bravo doesn't have to do as much work, to make sure John Stones isn't isolated as much? So that's the way I try and look at things. But as in terms of the way that people want to go about it, I don't think there's any right way or any wrong way to go about things. It's up to that individual, however they want to go about doing things in the media world, 100%.
It's a great point. You know, I have to speak from my own personal point of view. Being an analyst before, working on some MLS games and working on games that I've actually got lots of friends playing on the field at that time. It's never ever easy to be able to criticize those players, because after the game, you know, you're going to bump into those players. They're going to watch back the game and realize what you've just said to you. And I have to be honest with you, Phil. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to be a host at the end of the day, because being a host takes a lot of pressure off you as an analyst. You know, my career was never at the elite level, was never at the top level. So it's very difficult to get to the top table. And it's very difficult to be able to have that respect from players that you're actually criticizing. So it's a difficult job to do. I give you a lot of credit for the job that you do, Danny, because it is not easy. It's not easy to write about fellow professionals or coaches that you know you're going to bump into.
But you see, the thing is, for me, that's why I don't like to do it on an individual basis. So if there is something, if there's a glaring situation in a game where someone has missed an absolute sitter, if you're going to start off with bad, you finish with good. So say, for example, you know, you see a centre forward, he 5 yards out, puts the ball over the bar. First thing that you will say, which is the truth, he's going to be so disappointed with himself. Because it's an unbelievably bad miss. And you know what? 2 or 3 weeks ago, I seen him score one from 25 yards. So what have you done there? You've said the critical side of things, but then you've also it's getting the right balance. But like I say, there's no right and no wrong way. Some of the best pundits and some of the best people in the media that I listen to can be very scathing, and I'm like, wow, but he's got a point. So it really it's all about the individual. And like I say, there's no right way and there's no wrong way. What I would say is that for me, the two best pundits, and I will say it again, in England at the moment are Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher. I think they're absolutely sensational. The way they work together is second to none. And they things that people probably don't understand and don't realize, and they really narrow it down to make people, because that's what you've got to do. You've got to simplify things, because I think people are getting more and more into football all the time now, but they want things simplified, and it's the best way to be.
I go to England,
simplifying things.
I go to England, you'll have to revise that opinion, Danny. Before we go, mate, let's talk about the transfer window, because I want to ask you about this, but both of you lads about this, because Danny, transfer window. If the transfer window was in place back in Fergie's early days, for example, he never would have been able to sign Cantona. Maybe he never would have won the league. Signed Cantona in November. Cantona come in, essentially won Ferguson the league. The transfer window was brought in to stop people buying their way out of trouble, supposedly to bring through young players to give them more of a chance. Probably if it was challenged legally, it wouldn't stand. But most clubs have just went along with it. Managers now get sacked before a transfer window because clubs are careful about how they risk their money. clubs now, like Chelsea, what have you, stock up on players and have something like 40 loans. Has the transfer window worked? Is it good for football?
Oh, I would say it's fine within the Premier League. I think a rule that they brought in this season, they said that the stipulation was all the way through the Football League as well. And that for me is harsh, very harsh, because what we found was that towards the end of August, you had Championship teams, League One teams and League Two teams had star players that they wanted to build their team around. They were then given really a choice. Listen, either we sell this player for £5, £6, £7 million, we secure the financial side of our football club for X amount of years, or we keep this player and could end up getting relegated. Now, how it used to be within the Football League was you had the same window, the summer window and the January window, but you then, after a week or 2 weeks cooling off period, Championship clubs, League One and League Two clubs could then go and still loan other players. So there was a decision that could be made on August the 31st or January the 31st and say, listen, yeah, you know what, we'll let this player go because we know in a week and a half, 2 weeks, we can go and bring another player from somewhere. A young player maybe from the Premier League, which is going to get valuable experience. That would be good for the Premier League team and good for the player. So as in terms of the Premier League, no, I think it's absolutely fine. Everybody's in the same boat. But for your Championship, League One and League Two teams, I think it's a real big problem because the lesser teams now, like I say in the lower leagues, they're stockpiling now. So stockpiling, you're going to have unhappy players. You're spending more money than you want to because you know at any time you cannot buy, loan, sign any players after January the 31st and after August 31st. And that's who it affects, not the Premier League teams. I think they're fine.
Yeah, I'm quite excited about the Bundesliga in particular because we know that Bayern Munich are at the top of the table right now, but there's a couple of teams not too far behind them, and in particular RB Leipzig, who are one player away,
everybody loves in
two
Germany,
players away from actually really challenging for the title. So it's quite an interesting point because they've got money to spend. They've got a lot of money, and if they make one or two really good signings, they could challenge for the title. So for me, Phil, I think it's a good period of time, and I know that you're desperate to do the transfer show as well at some point along the way, Phil.
Yeah, we'll
so
have to
we can actually get into it.
We'll have to get into what's going to happen this month in terms of transfers. But I'm just curious about it from a player's point of view, Danny. And you're going to add to this, Ian. Used to be you could have freedom of movement at any time. Jose Mourinho has said Memphis Depay put in a transfer request 2 months ago, which was madness to me. You can't go anywhere for 2 months. But if you'd have asked Jose Mourinho back then, would he want to sell Memphis Depay? I'm sure he'd have said, let him go and replace him. From a player's point of view, you have 4 weeks to sort of move out. Do you feel that, given that it's such a short period of time, is it helpful as a player to know I'm in a terrible situation here? I don't like the manager. The manager doesn't like me. I want to move. I can't move. And what if you are sitting here in January and United, for example, if you'd allowed them to buy in November, I'm certain they'd have brought in at least 2 players. Now they're saying, okay, well, we're going to wait. Is it helping the players?
Most deals will be done before January. When I moved to Southampton in 2003, and the deal was being struck between the clubs from mid-November. So although you cannot move, everything other than signing can be done. Clubs will get in touch with other clubs, no doubt about it.
But you're seeing so many deadline day stuff now, Donny, right?
Because that's desperation signings more often than not.
Okay, but as a player, let's say you deadline day, phone rings from a club and says, you've got an opportunity to go here or there. You've got an hour to think about it, to move your whole family to another football club, another city. Is that not how mistakes are made? I mean, how many deadline day transfers actually work out?
It's tough. I moved twice on deadline day, one in January, one in August, and they both worked out all right, but they were protracted. Going back to Stoke and going to Southampton, they just took a certain amount of time for the deal to be done. But I just think one thing that people will tell you is that football is a short career, and I think from the age of, I don't know whether you'd agree, but from the age of 19 to probably 29, 30, you go to where you have to go to be successful, to be financially sound. When you get to 31, 32, then you start going, okay, now I need to settle my roots. Now I need to, my children don't need any more schools now. We don't need to be moving house again. But in that period of 10, 12 years, you go where the success takes you, or you go where the financial side of things take you, because it's a very short career. And any footballer that said they didn't do that, I'd probably disagree and say that the majority of them were thinking, you've got a short lifespan. As you are a piece of meat to a football club, you've got to use them the same way if they're not being right with you.
Yeah, I agree with you. For me, it was always difficult to move from club to club, because I always felt, I was so passionate for wherever I played. I was always representing the fans, always representing the club as much as I possibly could. Financially, you're looked after, which is great, but there's a love for that club. When you get transferred, sometimes against your own wishes, they want you out the door. It's never an easy thing to take. Yeah. I was fortunate never to have that situation. I did go from St. Pauli to Major League Soccer when I was 28, simply down to family reasons. We wanted to get back to an English-speaking country, and it was a family decision. And as you just mentioned there, I was looking for the next step. Where can I get my family situated? Where can I then start my progress for what's coming after football? And clearly I made the right decision. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to you two right now. So it's been great. And I think that the transfer window is a good thing. It's a very, very good thing. And coaches and clubs in particular have to be very smart now as to which players they come in. You mentioned it before, not in this show, but a previous show. Those players who come in have to have an immediate impact. They have to have hunger within them, and they have to be the player that's going to improve your squad. Otherwise, what's the point?
So with that in mind, is January a good time to move, especially if you're a defender, Danny? You can be a striker and go into a club, and I think it's an easier transition than being a defender to come into a club. And in January, we've seen the issues that Evra and Vidic had coming in January. Is it harder to move in January, to find the rhythm of a team, go somewhere else, get used to a whole new team?
Yes.
Is it a good time to move?
There's no preseason. No preseason makes it much more difficult.
Exactly. That's the easiest thing. The easiest time is to move in the sun because of preseason, but I would probably pretty much guarantee that Vidic and Evra, who went on to be absolute legends at Manchester United, when Manchester United come calling in January, you're probably not going to turn around to them and say, "Oh, wait till the summer," because that, unless you're a very, very special player, they're only going to come calling once, and you don't turn them down. So, I just think in that situation that you cannot turn down them situations. It's going to take a bit of time. And listen, managers aren't stupid. They know more often than not that when a player comes in January, it's going to take him longer to settle because he needs to get used to his teammates, used to the style of footballer that the manager wants. But the one thing a manager will do, and I saw it more and more as my career went forward with whether it be myself or players that moved to the football club where we were at, the manager would seek probably 10, 12 character references to make sure that player was going to fit into the dressing room regardless of his ability.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Gentlemen, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, boys.
I'm back in the studio this week on Fox Sports for FA Cup action. Danny, what you got coming on this week?
I have got Stoke City tomorrow versus Watford for viewers outside. Well, sorry, for Sky Sports, which will be going around the world. And then the weekend, I'm on TalkSport for Manchester United Reading. So should be a couple of good games.
I will be on TalkSport tomorrow myself, doing some Spanish football. Back on here later on in the week. So we'll catch you boys later. Thanks, Danny, as always, mate. Thanks, Ian.
Cheers, lads.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Make sure you give everyone a follow on Twitter, on social media, Beyond the Pitch. We're doing great things here. Danny, once again, thank you so much for joining us over there. Good luck tomorrow, Phil. All the best to you on TalkSport as well. We will see you all again next week.
See you later, lads. Take care, boys.
Hey, lads.
Bye.
All right.